Welcome back, dear travelers. Tonight, we turn our gaze to the vast skies of Middle-earth, where the great eagles soar on mighty wings, watching over the world below. More than simple creatures, these majestic beings were the messengers and guardians of Manwë, the king of the Valar, descending from the heights only in the most crucial moments of history. From the First Age, when Thorindr, the greatest of all eagles, defied Morgoth's darkness, to the Third Age, when Gwaihir, the Windlord, carried hope upon his back. The eagles have played a quiet yet profound role in shaping the fate of Middle-earth. They arrived as saviors in dire times, guided by the will of the heavens, never bound by the affairs of mortals, yet ever watchful. Before we continue, I want you, my dear listener, to comment down below where you're from and what time it currently is. Now, settle in and listen well, as we recount the soaring legacy of the great eagles of Manwë. The great eagles of Middle-earth were no ordinary creatures, nor were they merely oversized birds of prey. They were beings of extraordinary power, wisdom, and foresight, deeply tied to Manwë, the king of the Valar and lord of the skies. Their origins, like much of Ardur's earliest history, are shrouded in a certain mystery. Yet they are often regarded as either the direct creations of Manwë himself, or as powerful spirits, possibly Maya, who took on the form of mighty eagles. Manwë, the highest of the Valar and the one most closely aligned with Ilúvatar's will, ruled from his celestial halls atop Tanaketl, the tallest mountain in the world. From this vantage point, he gazed upon Middle-earth, ever watchful of the struggles and triumphs of its peoples. He was the master of the winds and all that soared upon them, and it was in his service that the great eagles were said to have been sent forth, acting as his messengers, heralds, and protectors of the free peoples. The earliest mention of the eagles in Middle-earth's recorded history suggests that they were present even before the First Age truly began. Some believe they were shaped by Manwë during the creation of Ardur, given dominion over the skies just as Ulmo ruled the seas and Aule shaped the earth. Others propose that they were Maya in a different guise, beings of spiritual might who chose to take on avian form to serve Manwë's divine purpose. While their precise origins remain uncertain, their allegiance was always clear. They acted according to the will of the Valar, intervening only when their wisdom dictated that it was necessary. The great eagles made their home in the high, unreachable peaks of Middle-earth, where few could venture. In the First Age, they were known to nest in the encircling mountains that surrounded the hidden city of Gondolin. Their leader, Thorindr, was the mightiest and most noble of their kind, possessing an unparalleled wingspan and strength that allowed him to challenge even the most fearsome creatures of Morgoth's armies. His keen eyes surveyed the lands of Beleriand, watching over the struggles of elves and men, ensuring that evil did not go unchallenged. Unlike other creatures of Middle-earth, the eagles were never bound to any single kingdom or race. They answered to no lord but Manwë himself, and their actions were not dictated by mortal concerns such as land, power, or war. They were creatures of divine intervention, appearing at moments when fate demanded their presence, whether to rescue a fallen hero, strike against the forces of darkness, or deliver messages from the Valar. Their role as messengers was particularly significant, as they served as the link between the heavens and the world below. When the Valar withdrew from direct involvement in Middle-earth's affairs, preferring to leave its fate to the free peoples, the eagles remained as their emissaries, silent observers who would act when the time was right. Despite their power, the eagles were never forces of conquest or domination. They did not seek to rule, nor did they wage wars for their own sake. Instead, they existed as a force of balance, stepping in only when the darkness of Morgoth or Sauron threatened to consume all. Their interventions were rare, yet always decisive. In this way, they embodied the will of Manwë, who sought not to control Middle-earth, but to preserve its harmony against the corruption that sought to unmake it. As the ages passed, the presence of the eagles shifted, but their connection to Manwë remained unchanged. Though their greatest deeds were recorded in the First Age, their descendants continued to watch over the world from the highest peaks, appearing when they were most needed. From the towering figure of Thorondor to the swift and noble Gwaihir of the Third Age, the eagles carried forth the legacy of their creator. Bound to the winds and skies, ever watchful, ever soaring, forever untouched by the greed and ambition of mortals. Their story is not one of conquest or dominion, but of wisdom, guidance, and intervention when all hope seemed lost. They were never servants of men or elves, nor tools to be wielded in the wars of Middle-earth, but rather silent guardians, shaped by the will of the heavens and bound to the skies above. In the battles between light and darkness, they were a reminder that even in the bleakest moments, unseen forces still watched over the world, ready to act when the hour was most dire. From their celestial origins as the messengers and watchers of Manwë, the great eagles descended into Middle-earth's history as forces of vigilance and intervention. Though their kind would remain present throughout the later ages, it was in the First Age that they took their most active role, shaping the course of history in the wars against Morgoth. Led by Thorondor, the mightiest of their kind, they soared above the peaks of Beleriand, guardians of the skies and silent sentinels against the growing shadow of Angband. It was during this time that the eagles cemented themselves as legendary beings, intervening in the affairs of elves and men when fate demanded it. Of all the great eagles to ever grace the skies of Arda, none were more powerful or revered than Thorondar. Described as possessing a wingspan of 30 fathoms, approximately 180 feet, he was unmatched in might, swift as a storm, and sharp of sight beyond all other creatures. His eyrie was set high in the encircling mountains, guarding the hidden city of Gondolin, though his watch extended far beyond its borders. Unlike the eagles of later ages, who intervened only at dire moments, Thorondor and his kin were a direct counterforce to Morgoth's dominion, openly defying him in the skies of Beleriand. Though Manwë had long refrained from direct interference in Middle-earth, the presence of Thorondor and the Eagles served as a link between the Valar and the Free Peoples. They were not mere watchers, nor passive observers, but agents of opposition against the Dark Lord, a celestial power manifested in the form of great winged guardians. One of Thorondor's earliest and most significant acts was the rescue of Medros, the eldest son of Feanor. During the early years of the First Age, after the tragic events of the Dagor Nuen Gileath battle under the stars, where the Noldor first clashed with Morgoth's forces upon their return to Middle-earth, Medros was betrayed and captured. Morgoth, seeking to sow discord among the elves, chained him to the peaks of Thangorodrim, suspending him high above the plains where no ally could reach. For years, Medros endured this torment, bound by an unbreakable iron shackle. The Noldor, unable to breach Morgoth's stronghold, could do nothing to save him. It was only through Fingon, the prince of the Noldor, that hope was rekindled. Determined to save his kinsman despite the bitter feud between their houses, Fingon scaled the perilous cliffs of Thangorodrim in search of Medros. Yet even his great skill could not take him close enough to break the chains. It was then that Thorondor intervened. The great eagle, answering an unspoken call, descended upon the peaks of Morgoth's stronghold, carrying Fingon upon his back. With Thorondor's aid, Fingon was able to reach Medros, but the chains could not be undone. In desperation, Medros begged for Fingon to sever his hand, allowing him to escape the torment. With a stroke of his sword, Fingon granted his wish, and Thorondor bore them both away to safety. This act had far-reaching consequences. The rescue of Medros led to the eventual reconciliation of the Noldor, preventing an all-out civil war among the exiled elves. It was also the first great defiance of Morgoth's power, a sign that even the Dark Lord's might was not absolute. In saving Medros, Thorondor did more than rescue a single elf. He preserved a fragile unity among the forces opposing Morgoth, a unity that would shape the battles to come. The tale of Beren and Luthien is one of the most cherished legends of Middle-earth. a story of love, sacrifice, and defiance against Morgoth's dominion. At its climax, after their daring quest to steal a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown, Beren and Luthien found themselves trapped within Angband, the very heart of darkness. Though they achieved the impossible, wresting a Silmaril from Morgoth himself, their victory came at great cost. Karkaroth, the monstrous wolf of Angband, mauled Beren, swallowing the stolen jewel and leaving him gravely wounded. As they fled from Morgoth's stronghold, their chances of survival seemed bleak. Once more, Thorondor and his kin intervened. Sweeping down like the wind of Manwë himself, the eagles lifted Beren and Luthien from the depths of Angband, carrying them far beyond Morgoth's reach. Without their aid, the lovers would have surely perished, and the fate of the Silmaril, one of the most coveted artifacts in history, would have been left to the darkness. This act further cemented the eagles as agents of fate, stepping in when the hands of mortals could do no more. Though they did not fight Morgoth's armies directly, they ensured that those destined to challenge him could live to see their fate fulfilled. The Near Neath Arnodiad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, was one of the most catastrophic conflicts of the First Age. The combined forces of elves, men, and dwarves sought to challenge Morgoth in open war. But through treachery and overwhelming might, they were utterly defeated. The battlefield was a slaughterhouse, with many of the greatest warriors of the age falling before the Dark Lord's onslaught. As the forces of Morgoth crushed all resistance, it was Thorondor and the Eagles who ensured that the tragedy was not absolute. Seeing Hurin and Hua, the mortal lords of men, standing firm against Morgoth's hordes, the Eagles intervened, ensuring that Tuatha, Hua's son, could escape. This was a crucial moment in history, for Tuatha would later be the father of Eärendil, the savior of Middle-earth in the final war against Morgoth. Years later, when Gondolin, the hidden city of the elves, was betrayed and laid to ruin, the Eagles once again took to the skies. As Morgoth's forces overran the city, Thorondor and his kin swooped down upon the dragons and Balrogs, slaying many in their wrath. They aided the escape of Tuatha, Idril, and their son, Eärendil, ensuring that the bloodline destined to save Middle-earth would endure. At the end of the First Age, the Valar finally unleashed their full might against Morgoth in the War of Wrath. This was the largest and most devastating battle in Arda's history. A conflict that saw entire lands reshaped and the world forever changed. It was here that the Eagles played their greatest role, joining the forces of the Valar in the final assault on Angband. As the great dragons of Morgoth took to the skies, led by Ankalagan the Black, the largest and most terrible of his kind, the Eagles rose to meet them. Thorinder and his kin fought alongside Eärendil, who sailed his ship Vingalot into battle, wielding the light of a Silmaril. In a climactic struggle, Eärendil slew Ancalagon, and the eagles ensured that Morgoth's winged beasts were vanquished. With their aid, the forces of light finally brought Morgoth to ruin, ending the First Age. The First Age was the time of the Eagles' greatest deeds, when they stood as guardians of the free peoples and direct challengers to Morgoth's dominion. From Medros' rescue to the final war, they proved time and again that they were more than mere birds. They were a force of divine will, sent by Manwë to shape the fate of Arda. As the First Age came to a close, the world changed, and so too did the role of the Eagles. In the next part, we will explore their presence in the Second Age, a time when their involvement became far more distant, yet their watchful eyes never fully turned away from Middle-earth. With the cataclysmic end of the First Age, the world was forever reshaped. Beleriand, the land where the great eagles had played their most active role in opposing Morgoth, was swallowed by the sea, leaving only fragments of its former grandeur. The Valar had cast Morgoth into the void, his dominion shattered, and the remnants of his armies scattered. With this victory, the need for the eagles as warriors of the skies diminished. Yet, though their presence in Middle-earth became less direct, they did not vanish. The Second Age was an era of transition, of new empires, rising shadows, and unseen watchers high above, ever observing the world's fate. The destruction of Morgoth did not bring lasting peace, for evil is not so easily extinguished. His greatest lieutenant Sauron survived, retreating into hiding before slowly rebuilding his strength. Though much of Middle-earth had been freed from the Dark Lord's grasp, the vigilance of the great eagles did not wane. While their direct interventions were fewer, they remained sentinels, watching from the high mountain peaks and vast, unreachable places of the world. Their strongholds were now less defined than in the First Age, when Thorinder had ruled from the encircling mountains. It is likely that, in the absence of Gondolin and other elven realms of Beleriand, the eagles established new eyries in the misty mountains or the uncharted heights of the world, keeping to their own dominion. Though they no longer needed to serve as direct warriors against a dark power, their role as Manwë's eyes in Middle-earth remained unchanged. The Second Age was marked by the rise of Númenor, the island kingdom of the Dunedain. This great civilization of men granted a land between Valinor and Middle-earth as a reward for their loyalty in the war against Morgoth, flourished beyond all others. Blessed with long life, wisdom, and strength, the Númenóreans became the greatest seafarers the world had ever known, spreading their influence across the coasts of Middle-earth. In the early years of Númenor, the eagles were seen as symbols of divine favor, appearing in moments of great significance. Some legends suggest that they were sighted above the island, especially near Mentaltama, the sacred mountain at Numenor Center, where the Dunedain came to offer prayers to Eru Iluvatar. It was said that during these ceremonies, 3 great eagles would descend, circling the mountain's peak in solemn majesty before vanishing into the heavens. Their presence reassured the Numenorians that they remained under the watchful gaze of the Valar, as long as they upheld the purity of their kingdom. But Numenor's destiny, like so many great civilizations before it, was one of pride, decline, and eventual ruin. As the centuries passed, Numenor grew in power, yet with its strength came arrogance. Its kings, once humble and faithful, became increasingly jealous of the immortality of the elves, and resentment festered. Sauron, now risen once more in Middle-earth, watched from afar, waiting for the moment to strike. By the time he openly declared himself, claiming the title King of Men, Numenor had already begun its descent into corruption. Though initially opposed to Sauron, the Numenorians in their later years became conquerors, establishing great colonies along Middle-earth's coasts and enforcing their dominion upon weaker peoples. Their unchecked expansion and growing thirst for power drove a wedge between them and the Valar. The eagles, once seen as harbingers of divine approval, became omens of warning. According to legend, as the later kings of Numenor drifted further from the grace of the Valar, the eagles no longer descended upon Meneltama. Their absence was seen as a silent judgment, a sign that the kingdom had strayed from its noble path. Some accounts tell of a final warning, when Ar-Pharazôn, the last king of Numenor, began building his great armada to invade the Undying Lands. Black clouds covered the skies, and the eagles were seen circling ominously above the palace. But pride had deafened the king to all warnings. When Numenor finally fell, its armies drowned, its people scattered, its land swallowed by the sea. The eagles did not intervene. There was no salvation for a kingdom that had defied the will of the Valar. Yet, from the wreckage of Numenor, hope endured. Elendil and the faithful escaped, founding the kingdoms of Arna and Gondor in Middle-earth, where the light of Numenor would live on. Though their presence was far less dramatic than in the First Age, the eagles remained in Middle-earth, distant yet observant. It is likely that they witnessed Sauron's deception of the elves, the forging of the rings of power, and the creation of the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom. They may have watched the fall of Erik-Gyon, the great elven realm that Sauron destroyed in his first war against the Free Peoples. Yet, they did not descend to intervene. Why the eagles did not take direct action against Sauron in the Second Age remains a matter of perspective. Unlike Morgoth, whose power defied the very order of Arda, Sauron was a lesser threat in the grand scheme of the world. The Valar had chosen not to intervene directly, leaving the free peoples to determine their own fate. The Eagles, as their emissaries, followed this principle. They were not warriors to be summoned at will, nor did they serve as soldiers in the conflicts of elves and men. They appeared only when their purpose dictated it, when hope needed to be carried, when a destiny needed to be preserved. Thus, throughout the rise and fall of Númenor, the wars of Sauron, and the changing lands of Middle-earth, the Eagles remained guardians in the high places of the world, always watching, always waiting. The Second Age passed in war, ruin, and renewal, ending with the War of the Last Alliance, where elves and men finally overthrew Sauron, though not forever. The world entered a new era, one where the Eagles would once again take an active role in shaping its fate. Now, we will turn our pages to the Third Age, where Gwaihir, the Windlord, and his kin emerged from the misty peaks once more, intervening in moments of great peril and carrying hope upon their wings. Through the long and turbulent years of the Second Age, the great Eagles had remained distant, silent observers rather than active participants in the struggles of elves and men. With the dawn of the Third Age, however, their presence once more became woven into the fate of Middle-earth. Though the world had changed, and the great kingdoms of the past had diminished, the Eagles endured, their watchful eyes ever fixed upon the shifting balance between light and shadow. It was in this age that the line of Thorondor continued, and among his noble descendants, one name would rise above all others: Gwaihir, the Windlord. While the great wars and conflicts of the Third Age were fought largely by the free peoples, the Eagles, as ever, remained a force beyond the affairs of mortals. They were neither allies to be commanded, nor creatures of war to be summoned. Instead, they acted according to their own purpose, answering only to the will of Manwë, and appearing only when the hand of fate required it. Yet, despite their independence, their interventions were pivotal, shifting the tide of battle, delivering messages, and ensuring that those upon whom the fate of Middle-earth rested were not forsaken. With the passing of Thorondor and the destruction of Beleriand, his kin scattered across Middle-earth. Some may have sought refuge in the misty mountains, dwelling in the highest, most unreachable peaks, while others may have traveled to distant lands beyond the knowledge of elves and men. By the Third Age, the leader of the great Eagles was Gwaihir, the Windlord, a noble and mighty descendant of Thorondor, though whether he was his direct offspring or merely of his lineage is unknown. Gwaihir was among the greatest of his kind, swift of wing and sharp of sight. And he, like his ancestors, did not concern himself with the petty struggles of mortals. Yet, when the need arose, he and his kin did not hesitate to act. He would become a key figure in the history of Middle-earth, aiding those who stood against the growing shadow of Sauron, just as his forebears had defied Morgoth long before. One of the first recorded interventions of the Eagles in the Third Age came during the events of The Hobbit at the Battle of Five Armies, when Thorin Oakenshield and his company reclaimed Erebor from the dragon Smaug. Their victory was soon overshadowed by the looming conflict between dwarves, elves, and men, who all laid claim to the mountain's wealth. Yet even as these factions prepared for war, a far greater threat emerged. An army of orcs and wargs, sent by Sauron's forces to crush the free peoples and secure the north for darkness. As the battle raged on the slopes of Erebor, the free peoples, though valiant, were heavily outnumbered. It was then that the sky darkened, and from the heights of the misty mountains, the great eagles descended upon the battlefield. They struck with sudden and overwhelming force, turning the tide of battle by scattering the orcs and driving the wargs into a panicked retreat. Their intervention allowed the free peoples to rally and ultimately emerge victorious, securing Erebor and ensuring that the forces of darkness did not claim the lonely mountain. This act, while seemingly limited to a single conflict, had profound consequences. Had the battle been lost, the northern regions of Middle-earth would have fallen under Sauron's influence far sooner, allowing his forces a foothold long before the War of the Ring had even begun. The Eagles had not merely saved the free peoples in that moment. They had preserved a future where resistance against Sauron was still possible. In the years that followed, the shadow of Sauron grew ever darker, and his influence spread across Middle-earth once more. As he prepared to openly declare himself, he corrupted Saruman, the head of the White Council, who in turn betrayed the free peoples, and imprisoned Gandalf atop the Tower of Orthanc. With no means of escape, the fate of the wizard, and perhaps Middle-earth itself, hung in the balance. It was then that Gwaihir, the Windlord, arrived, sent by Radagast the Brown, who still remained true to his purpose despite Saruman's treachery. Gwaihir soared over Isengard and found Gandalf stranded upon the pinnacle of the tower. In a moment of divine providence, the Windlord lifted Gandalf upon his back and bore him away, carrying him to safety. This was no mere rescue, it was an intervention that ensured the struggle against Sauron would continue. Had Gandalf perished, the Fellowship would never have formed, and the great events that led to the downfall of the Dark Lord might never have come to pass. Once more, the Eagles had appeared not to fight, but to preserve hope. The War of the Ring reached its climax at the Battle of the Morannon, where the last great army of the Free Peoples stood against Sauron's overwhelming legions before the Black Gate. Though vastly outnumbered, the armies of Gondor and Rohan held their ground, knowing that their battle was not to claim victory, but to buy time for Frodo and Sam to reach Mount Doom and destroy the One Ring. Yet, as the battle raged, the Nazgul, riding upon their fell beasts, descended from the skies, spreading terror and despair. Just as the tide threatened to turn against the Free Peoples, a great cry was heard upon the wind, and from the clouds, Gwaihir and the great eagles appeared once more. They swept down upon the battlefield, engaging the Nazgul in aerial combat, driving them back and freeing the warriors of Middle-earth from their terror. In that final hour, as the ring was unmade and Sauron's power collapsed, the eagles ensured that the skies belonged to the forces of light, preventing any final desperate attempt by the Dark Lord's servants to turn the tide. As Mount Doom erupted and the land of Mordor began to collapse, Frodo and Sam lay stranded upon the slopes of the mountain, exhausted and on the brink of death. Their journey was complete, but there was no escape. Yet even as all seemed lost, the eagles descended once more. Led by Gwaihir, the Wind Lord, the eagles swept down through the blackened skies, bearing the hobbits away from the ruin of Mordor and carrying them to safety. It was a moment of poetic justice. Just as the Valar had once sent the eagles to deliver Beren and Luthien from Angband, so too did they now rescue Frodo and Sam, the quiet heroes who had done what even the greatest warriors of old could not. The Third Age was an era of great trials, but through it all, the great eagles remained silent protectors, unseen until the moment they were most needed. They were not bound by the conflicts of mortals, nor did they take sides in the wars of kings. Yet, when the fate of Middle-earth hung in the balance, they answered the call, ensuring that the light of hope was never extinguished. As the Third Age faded and the world changed once more, the eagles, too, began to withdraw. Their purpose had been fulfilled, and the great work of the Valar was coming to an end. In the next part, we will explore the deeper symbolism of the eagles, their connection to the divine, and the true nature of their role in the grand design of Middle-earth. Throughout the long history of Middle-earth, the great eagles were far more than mere creatures of the skies. Their interventions were rare but decisive, their presence fleeting yet monumental. Unlike the kingdoms of elves, dwarves and men, which rose and fell with the ages, the eagles existed beyond the ambitions and conflicts of mortals. Their actions were not driven by conquest, greed, or even allegiance to any particular race, but rather by something greater, an unseen purpose that bound them to the fate of Middle-earth itself. To understand the eagles is to look beyond their deeds and into their deeper meaning. They were more than powerful allies to the Free Peoples. They were symbols of divine intervention, guardianship, and fate. They appeared not when summoned, but when they were needed, reflecting the will of forces far beyond the comprehension of those they aided. At their core, the great eagles were emissaries of Manwë, king of the valor and lord of the skies. Unlike other beings in Middle-earth, the eagles did not operate according to their own desires, nor did they meddle in the affairs of mortals unless their intervention was required. This set them apart from the free peoples who shaped their own destinies, and from creatures like the ants who had their own ancient concerns. Instead, the eagles acted as messengers and enforcers of Manwë's will, appearing when fate demanded their presence. Manwë, who was closest in thought to Iru Iluvatar, rarely involved himself directly in the struggles of Middle-earth. Unlike Olmo, who intervened frequently through water, or Aule, whose works shaped the world's foundations, Manwë was a more distant figure, preferring to observe from afar. The eagles, then, served as his presence in the physical realm. His watchful eyes, his swift wings, and his guiding hand in moments where hope was faltering. Their role as messengers is evident throughout history. In the First Age, Thorondor brought tidings to the free peoples and aided those whose fate had not yet been fulfilled. In the Third Age, Gwaihir and his kin carried vital information between Gandalf and other key figures, ensuring that the struggle against Sauron could continue. Even in their acts of war, such as their intervention at the Battle of Five Armies or their arrival at the Battle of the Morannin, they did not act as conquerors, but as agents of balance, tipping the scales only when necessary. A common thread in all of the eagles' interventions is that they arrived at moments of great consequence, often at the turning point of an era or the climax of a struggle. Unlike the free peoples, who had to fight for survival in every battle, the eagles did not engage in prolonged wars or extended conflicts. Instead, their presence was a signal that the world stood on the edge of a great shift, and their actions ensured that destiny unfolded as it was meant to. In this way, they can be seen as heralds of change, their sudden appearances marking the beginning or end of something greater than any one individual. Thorondor's rescue of Medros prevented the Noldor from falling into irreversible division. His aid to Beren and Luthien ensured that the Silmarils remained central to Morgoth's downfall. The Eagle's arrival at the Battle of the Morannin was the final act before the destruction of the One Ring. Each time they appeared, it was as though the world itself had reached a moment where intervention from beyond was necessary. Beyond their role as instruments of fate, the eagles were also symbols of hope. Their arrival often came when all seemed lost, when darkness pressed in and the free peoples were at the brink of despair. Unlike warriors or kings, who inspired others through leadership and battle, the eagles represented something more profound. The idea that even in the direst moments, salvation can come from unexpected places. Few moments embody this theme more clearly than the rescue of Frodo and Sam from the slopes of Mount Doom. The two hobbits, having carried the ring to its final doom, had given everything to their quest. Their journey was complete, yet they were stranded, exhausted, and without escape. It was at this moment, when all seemed beyond saving, that the eagles descended from the heavens, bearing them away to safety. This act was not merely a rescue, but a reflection of one of Middle-earth's greatest themes: that hope, no matter how fragile, is never truly lost. The eagles were not bound by the struggles of mortals, but in this moment, they became the embodiment of deliverance, ensuring that the heroes who had saved the world were not left to perish in the ashes of Mordor. Given their immense power, some might wonder why the eagles did not play a greater role in the wars of Middle-earth. If they could tip the balance in decisive moments, why did they not simply carry the ring to Mount Doom or lead an army against Sauron? The answer lies in their very nature. They were never meant to be warriors or tools of war. The eagles were not servants of the free peoples, nor were they bound to the will of men or elves. They answered to Manwë, and through him to Ilúvatar himself. Their purpose was not to interfere in the struggles of Middle-earth, but to ensure that fate unfolded as it was meant to. Carrying the ring to Mordor would have undermined the trials of those chosen to bear it. The struggles that defined the very themes of perseverance, sacrifice, and free will. Likewise, had they actively waged war against Sauron, they would have become something they were never meant to be: conquerors rather than guardians. Their power was immense, but it was not meant for domination. They were watchers, intervening only when necessary, ensuring that the world did not fall too far into darkness, but never ruling it themselves. The eagles of Middle-earth were more than creatures of flesh and feather. They were manifestations of divine purpose, celestial beings who soared above the struggles of Arda, yet descended when the fate of the world hung in the balance. Their presence was never arbitrary. Each time they appeared, they brought hope, balance, and a reminder that forces greater than mortals still watched over Middle-earth. Though the Third Age came to a close, and the world changed with the departure of the elves and the diminishing of magic, the eagles remained. Their final fate is unknown, but perhaps that is fitting. Just as they appeared without warning in times of great need, so to do they vanish into legend, waiting, ever watchful, for the moment when they might be needed once again. As we look back upon their legacy, we see not just mighty creatures of the sky, but symbols of hope, fate, and the unseen forces that shaped the world. The great eagles of Manwë endure, their wings ever spread, their watch never ending. And so, Dear listeners, the tale of the great eagles drifts into the quiet hush of night. High above Middle-earth, they soared on silent wings, watching, waiting, their presence fleeting yet profound. In their great eyries among the clouds, they remain, perhaps still watching, unseen and patient, their keen eyes ever searching for the moment when they might be needed once more. But for now, the winds are calm, the stars glimmer softly, and all is at peace. Close your eyes, let your thoughts drift like feathers on the breeze, and rest knowing that even in the darkest of times, unseen wings may yet rise to carry you home. Sleep well, my dear travelers, and good night.